Chapter 9 is titled Producing Data Through Experiments. Experiments are what's going to allow us to get a cause and effect. But before we look at that, we're going to look at observational studies, which is a little bit more in line with what we've looked at already this semester in terms of we're looking at relationships between variables, and we're not going to get cause and effect out of those. So an observational study is where we are just observing people, we're recording information, we're measuring things, but we're not doing anything to influence the results. So we're not giving people an experimental medication or telling them they have to eat a cup of broccoli every morning for breakfast, or they have to spend an hour painting a day or anything like that. So we're not doing anything to influence them, we're just observing, measuring, and recording. Okay, the purpose for an observational study is to describe some sort of group or situation or the relationship that we're seeing between these variables. Okay, so again, this is really important. There is no manipulation of any factors going on in a study. So it's kind of the key difference if you're reading a description of something, you're trying to decide, is this a study or is this an experiment? If you see any sort of manipulation going on, so having people take a medication or do something, then that's going to be an experiment. If all we're doing is observing and recording things, then that's an observational study. Okay, now that doesn't mean that you're not doing anything as a researcher. So maybe we're looking at calories in a Big Mac. You can certainly take that to a lab, have them figure out how many calories are in there, but you're not doing anything to manipulate the amount of calories in there. So you're not standing next to the cook saying, oh, use this cheese that has more calories or something like that. Okay, so we're not manipulating anything. You're allowed to measure things and do what it takes to measure them, but you're not manipulating them. A well-designed study does allow for inference to a larger population. We talked about this in chapter 8, how you really need a random sample in order to apply your results to the population. And then again, a study does not give us cause and effect. Okay, we're only going to get that through an experiment that has a random assignment to treatment. So we're going to get into that later in this chapter. There are two main types of observational studies. The first one is a retrospective study. So we're going back in time and looking at the past. The nice thing about retrospective studies is that the data is all there, and it's usually not too terribly difficult to go pull. And so it also doesn't take a lot of time, right? So as soon as you've pulled that data, you can start to analyze it and look at it and see what kind of relationships you see there. A prospective study, though, is where you follow people into the future. So this does take more time, and it is more costly because you're paying your researchers to follow these people for a length of time. Okay, so this could be, you could be following them for weeks, months, or even years. So, and if you're in health sciences or psychology or sociology, a lot of times these are referred to as longitudinal studies, and some of those will run 20 years. Okay, that's a lot of work for the researcher to keep track of people. So whenever someone moves, you've got to make sure that you have their updated address and those kinds of things. So a prospective study usually is going to cost more than a retrospective study. Let's go ahead and look at an example of that. So suppose we're interested in how music and grades are related. If I was going to do a retrospective study, I'd survey all of you and ask you to tell me, were you involved in music in high school? And then also give me your final high school GPA. Okay, so I'm looking into the past. It should be pretty easy to collect that data. If I'm doing a prospective study, so maybe I'm going to follow you until you graduate from college, I'll have you record whether you ever participated in any music type of activities during that time, and then we'll look at your final college GPA. So that would be a prospective study. Okay, so you have some classwork. This is number 1 on your paper. And I'm going to have you go ahead and pause the video and give it a try. And then I'll come back in a couple seconds and we'll talk about the answers. Okay, so the first one, a researcher from Las Vegas plans to obtain data by following to the year 2032 siblings of victims who perished in the 2017 Las Vegas shooting. So this is going to be a prospective study. It's actually really nice. They tell us what year they're going to, so we are definitely assured that we are going into the future. So this is prospective. A researcher from Johns Hopkins University obtains data about the effects of alcohol on driving by examining car crash reports from the past 5 years. Okay, this is going to be retrospective. They use words like, we're looking at the past 5 years that are a good indicator that that is a retrospective study. An economist collects income data by selecting and interviewing subjects now, then going back in time to see if they had the wisdom to take a statistics course between the years of 1980 and 2005. So they even say going back in time, so that's definitely a retrospective study. And then students whose undergraduate major was economics were followed for 10 years after graduation to study the number of different jobs they took. So we're following them 10 years into the future, so this will be a prospective study. Okay, you'll notice that all of these were just recording some data. We're not actually doing anything to our participants. This is what makes them all a study.